Greetings, my dear friends, all you artsy AFers. Thanks for tuning in again to another episode of Artsy AF Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Norris. This week, my guest is Roman Villagrana, and let's just suffice it to say that this conversation is really heady. So strap in. We talk about some far out stuff. Roman goes into his story, his background coming up in Seattle in the days of grunge. We talk about interdimensionality, and I'll just leave it at that, short and sweet. And we had a busy week on the Patreon this week. 3 brand new subscribers. Start in order. First is Alec Falle Hamiliton. Hope I'm saying that middle name right, but Alec Hamilton. And you can find him at Alec Falle Hamilton _art on Instagram. He's out here making paintings, some cool waves with grids, some sacred G it looks like. Thanks for subscribing, man. And then we also have Dave Heath, and you can find Dave on Instagram at Dave Heath Art, all one word there. Also making paintings. Go check him out. Very cool stuff. Looks like you've been schooled in the Mish technique, my friend. Keep up the good work. And last but not least, we have Ezra Arenson, who goes by Contra Scandal on Instagram. He is making music, playing the violin. He released through Gravitas Recordings recently. So big shouts to you, my friend. Thank you. And thank you to all the patrons, every one of you. We're approaching 20, which I guess is some kind of milestone. And getting closer every day to that $1,000 per month goal that I have for myself. With that, I'd be able to easily cover all my living expenses. But more importantly, what I would do with that money is be able to pay my man, Andrew Size, to edit the audio and video of this podcast. That's what I'm shooting towards. And I hope you all can continue to help me out. Been feeling good about everything, and I just really appreciate it so much. And y'all need to know that. Wouldn't be doing this without positive feedback and support from, mostly people that I know, which is really awesome. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Now let's jump right into this episode. Here is Roman Villagrana. Really appreciate you taking time today.
Thank you.
Yeah, how you been? Congrats on the birth of your newest child.
Yeah, it's been amazing. It's really amazing because when her mom and I were connecting, we both saw a little girl in our visions.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not necessarily trying to deny the vision, but I couldn't help but express that fact as well.
Yeah.
Which kind of scared me at first. I was like, oh, great, another kid. But
yeah, I was going to ask you, did you feel like you were ready for that?
This is my 4th child.
Right.
And I don't think, I do speak of some people that I feel like they're very evolved families, and they even plan these things.
Yeah.
But as far as for me, including my art, I never know what's going on necessarily. And,
right.
I just try and be humble as much as I can, and then presence is the key.
Nice. Well, yeah. Since this is our first podcast date, I'd love to know about your backstory, like how you got into art. Maybe the beginnings of Tribe 13 and living in Seattle at that time.
Yeah, those are. I've had wonderful experience all throughout my life, but the Seattle experience definitely will always be the iconic beginning for me.
Mm-hmm.
But my real beginning, though, goes all the way down to being uh, 3 years old
Mm-hmm.
that I precisely remember being turned on to art.
Really?
Because before being an artist, I was a magician.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little boy trying to make things disappear,
Nice.
and I really um, was, because I saw the act, and you're impressed by, like the so-called magicians,
Uh-huh.
and it has a way of entrancing us, and I was entranced by that at a very super young age, and I remember that, trying to make things appear and disappear.
Yeah.
And then one day, my one of my older sisters came home from school, and she brought this huge pad, a drawing pad. Now that I think about it, it might have not been that huge. Maybe I was just really small,
Yeah.
but I remember it being really huge.
Right.
And there was a she turned the page to a girl in a bikini, and I
Okay.
was like, "Whoa, that's a girl in a bikini!" And then she turned the page, and there was a crocodile, and I was like, "Wow, that's a crocodile!" And at that instance, I knew that art was real magic, because it was just lines on a flat two-dimensional piece of paper, but I could see the reality it was conveying,
Yeah.
and that was making things appear. And that was when I was 3 years old. So at that moment, I considered myself an artist, precisely.
Nice. So you knew, like, were you able to like articulate it in words, in terms of like, oh, I'm an artist. I'm a image maker at that young age, or did that come a little bit later?
Well, well, fast forward, it all comes to a head in Seattle.
Okay.
But from that point, through my upbringing, I always considered myself an artist, even though I did doodle a lot, I drew a lot, and but oftentimes I didn't. But I still considered myself an artist. I was more like a dreamer. I was a
Mhm.
dreamer in school. I
Yeah.
was a I was dreaming everywhere. But I always considered myself an artist because I felt like being an artist was the label for a dreamer.
Yeah.
Um, but I didn't have the influence around me as far as doing art.
Sure.
So I feel like I developed later in my action of doing artwork, even though I always was a better drawer than most kids in my school. And that was always my angle for friendships and such. And sports too, early on.
Mhm.
But as everyone started to outgrow me, that started to change.
Totally. Yeah, I can relate to that for sure. I think I was probably a little bit more influenced by like the pressures of just other friends who were playing sports, and I mean I enjoyed them, but eventually, I came to realize like I don't, I don't like practicing in the heat 2 times a day, and I'd rather just be creating things or creating jokes with my friends, or dreaming, as you said, basically.
Exactly. But the funny thing is, during those times, well, speaking for myself, I
Hmm.
don't have the influence of another artist.
Yeah, yeah, I
So
didn't either.
I my best friends were jocks,
Uh-huh.
but I was friends with everybody. But I definitely was always attracting uh, the alpha people for some odd reason, because I would
Mm.
never felt like I was.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
but for some reason, I always ended up hanging out with the popular kids, and my other friends that weren't so popular, the stoners.
Yeah, yeah.
I was always going in between everybody, and they were always in question of that. And I was just being an artist, but I
Yeah,
just didn't know exactly what that was.
yeah, yeah. I can't I wish I could nail this quote, but there's some sort of quote that's like it's something along the lines of like, beware of artists, they can move and be comfortable in any like point in the hierarchy or point in the like social strata.
Completely correct. And then this is a foreshadowing the future and foreshadowing our destiny, I believe,
Hmm.
because here on Earth, we're all destined to be artists. We're all interdimensional beings, and we go beyond the boxes that we create ourselves in. And the boxes that we've created ourselves in is creating destruction and
Hmm.
all the ills that we're dealing with at the moment and always have.
Yeah. Yeah, I think everybody's an artist whether they realize it or not, because if an artist is someone who just creates something, then just by living your life, you're an artist, right? Because you're creating situations in your life, creating your you're creating through words, even if you just speak them, even if you don't necessarily write them down. And I think that's part of my goal with this project here is to is to like low key convince anyone who listens, like wrap them up in this whirlwind of the idea that like they too are an artist. And if they don't want to, if they're uncomfortable with that label or whatever,
Hmm.
it just thinking of like life as like your creation or your project, I think is very helpful.
Well, it's very challenging because we're scratching the surface of a multidimensional subject,
Yeah.
and language has its limitations. So calling ourselves artists might be limiting, or it might scare people
Hmm.
to accept that. Um, but that's just it. What we're talking about, I feel, is a really deep healing,
Hmm.
and we've really uh, put ourselves in a very vulnerable situation of judging ourselves by the external reality.
Yeah.
And that to me is being the opposite of an artist. That's a reactionary. And we're all reactionaries. What we're really needing to learn, though, is that we are all needed and wanted and nurtured. So the inside of ourself comes out into the world. And that
Hmm.
is being an artist, for the sake of a better word. True human being, really.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
and this,
I struggle with that actually a lot of times. And I think it's like outside influences or like the externalities of things just coming at you nonstop, you know?
they're the miracle of our existence. It's
Hmm.
the beauty of the world.
Hmm.
But it's so beautiful and so miraculous that we associate ourselves as being us. That is not the truth. The truth is that we are feeding into that,
Hmm.
and we're gifting into that. And every single problem that exists on earth is the consequence of believing otherwise.
Nice. Yeah, yeah, that kind of like touches on the subject of ego or like the sense of self that we all have. And have you had any was there any sort of like transpersonal moment, or was it just a slow kind of like a slow burn for you in terms of like coming to these realizations?
It was definitely, there was a moment in time, and it happened in Seattle.
Yeah.
It was a fundamental awakening, and it was a psychedelic awakening.
Hmm.
Prior to this moment, I never did any. I didn't even smoke pot, and it
Nice.
was when I was around 21 years old,
Okay.
and I was enrolled in the Art Institute in Seattle, and so I was up there for school, and I
Hmm.
barely graduated high school in this cowboy town, to express where I'm coming from,
Uh-huh.
into a city for the first time, and but this one night um, really exploded my understanding into almost everything. I feel like I'm still living that same day. Um,
Interesting.
but that being said, it also awakened me to all the times in my life prior to that that were very mystical, like being an artist, like we were speaking about, but we didn't have other people to relate to.
Hmm.
I didn't have other people to relate those mystical experiences that I had growing up, other than my religious upbringing that did touch upon that.
Hmm.
So I always felt like I was a religious person up until that moment. Um, in a weird way, I think I became more religious afterwards in my own way.
Right,
But
right.
before that, I gave credit to my external belief system that was trying to be given to me.
Right.
But it was that moment that I awoke, and it changed everything at that moment.
Nice. Um, can you can you give me a little more like context around that? I just like a lot of times I like stories, I think that that's what we're best at, being humans and all is telling stories in various different ways, whether it's through images or through words. But what were you doing? Who were you hanging out with? Was it like a rave or something? That's just me throwing
No,
throwing
nope,
something out there.
no. The raves came afterwards, and I was
Okay.
very lucky to. I consider my life very magical
Hmm.
because the moment that I experienced this was extremely miraculous, including doing the psychedelic. Right before that, I was doing these paintings, Native American paintings,
Hmm.
because I was really into spirituality, and I definitely was earnest in wanting to know more and commune more with God. That's always been my case ever since I was a little kid.
Hmm.
Very adamant about it, but at the same time, very free spirited too, not trapped by any of those things as well.
Hmm.
But Native American ideology kind of entranced me because it was touching upon that,
Hmm.
and it was up from the earth and all of that. And I kept on wanting to go on a vision quest because I started learning more what vision questing was, and I was becoming an adult and learning about all these things. And I was like really desiring a need for this vision quest.
Hmm.
And then, as we all are, surrounded by friends that have experimented with drugs already
Hmm.
by then, my friend says, "You should try psychedelics." I'm like, I was almost anti-drugs at that point,
Really?
literally, because I grew up with a lot of friends that got into trouble, and I was always a sheltered, sensitive kid.
Hmm.
And even though they were my friends too, I never really partook.
Yeah.
Um, but I started opening up to these things, and I was on the couch, and this is the beginning of the miraculous moment.
Hmm.
I was sitting on the couch in my apartment downtown Seattle, pondering this thing, and my door opens, and this guy I never met walks into my apartment. Obviously, it was college, and we have people coming in and out, so
Sure,
it's kind
sure.
of like whatever. But he came in and he pointed at me with a, a flow and says, "I heard you are looking for acid." And I was like, uh, I didn't know what to do, but I love people, so I'm like, oh, this is weird. This is
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
So I took him out to uh, pizza
Okay.
to talk about it. So
Nice.
we're talking about it so I can learn more about it. And he was explaining this. And then I realized we both realized that we met each other in Eastern Oregon in the middle of nowhere
Really?
a few years ago prior,
Whoa.
random.
Whoa.
So this was the beginning of this synchronistic event
Hmm.
that was happening. And it happened before even taking the acid.
Right, right.
And then that day, I met two other friends that would become really super close friends and roommates for years to come. That night, they were skateboarding, and we said, "Hey, you want to join us on this experience?" And then they said, "Sure." They said yes, which was it was just this vibration that just sucked us all into this moment. And yeah, I we took it. We started ex- um, experimenting. We didn't really feel much at first, like typical. And then I remember the grain of the wood starts vibrating, and
Yeah.
I start hearing beetle music because that's something that I'm familiar with.
Right.
Very psychedelic. And in the back of my mind, I kept on thinking to myself, I knew it. I knew it all along. There was something else that was reaching me.
Hmm.
And yeah, that was the beginning, and I started seeing how everything I learned from religion was true, but it was being conveyed from an external source out of control.
Right, right.
And I instantly saw that, and I had a job up until that moment.
Yeah.
That was the last time I actually had a job,
Really?
a so-called job.
Right, 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 right.
I've worked after that, but I worked as an artist where projects, creative projects, and I really took my earnest desire to commune with God. God stimulated more by that moment of really giving myself 100% with faith into that.
Nice. Yeah, I want to touch back on how that moment was sort of actually started in the past when you and that guy had randomly met each other in Eastern Oregon. And it just makes me think of like how we experience time and how I don't know, maybe the rational part of our brain says that it's just linear, but really like if you really look into the experience of time, it's like it's kind of like cyclical or spiral. It's like one point on the spiral is sort of the same as just another point on either the inner part or the outer part of the spiral. So was this kind of the birth of the idea of synchromysticism? And maybe it hadn't been articulated yet, but was this like your first conscious experience of it?
Precisely. As you know, I've chosen my artist name, is Synchromystic, because it exemplifies that. And you're right. I started recognizing that there was this pattern, a sequence that is far beyond the control of any one of us.
Right.
But we are able to participate. And that's where I started learning how to commune with God. It was recognizing these things. I started recognizing, well, if God has a voice, it can't be a linear dialogue or like a voice out of the sky talking to me automatically. Even though there's room for that too, in my belief, if that happens, like, well, this is reality.
Yeah.
Because the elements of nature can provide such things.
Sure.
But it is through the elements of nature that we're able to communicate, because communication is made from the elements and from the tools that are physical around us, like auditory vibration and such.
Yeah.
That being said, I started to recognize that there was a pattern. When I'm thinking inside, externally, the universe starts reacting with me. And I started to tap into this. And that was the beginning of the synchro-mystic path that I was on. I didn't even know what synchronicities were at that point. This language came to me when I was first-handedly talking my experience to people, and people orally were teaching me everything. And I consider that the voice of God was the random people talking to me. Sometimes it was a bum on the street, and a junkie, or sometimes a prestigious person that I would randomly get to hang out with. And that has Seattle nurtured that opportunity.
Yeah. I think that's such a healthy way to look at life. And I know that Ram Dass, I think, talked about that, like trying to see everyone as just a reflection of the divine, and trying to see, like, trying to learn from people, whatever they have to offer you.
It's really strange having an interview dialogue on a subject, because you touch on things from the future and the past, and what you're just bringing up here is something to do with what I want to talk about later in our talk, because it's more precise to the art movement. But I feel like that is our job as artists, visionary artists, or whatever label you want to name yourself, being a true artist. And that is, we're here to dissolve boundaries, and we're here to help nurture an open mind to allow contradictions to coexist.
Nice.
And I really do believe that that is our job as artists. And we don't have to be so serious about it with an intent to tell you something,
right?
But just by being, it automatically starts doing that.
Nice. Yeah, I'm a big fan of like coincidentia positorum. You heard that phrase before? Or just sitting and letting contradictions, same things that seem like contradictions, kind of resolve themselves into like the yin yang, for lack of a better idea at the top of my head. But it's dark and light, all these dualities and contradictions actually turn out to be just two sides of the same thing, sort of like dancing with each other. And
Precisely.
yeah, I love talking about that. And
well, that's what way we try. We can time travel that way. We can pick a moment in time, and we recognize something that happened, like the atom bomb.
Yeah.
A negative thing, and then we ask ourselves, what is a positive thing? LSD.
Right.
Then we can go into that dimension by splitting those things apart and recognizing and going into that. So if you have an art history book, artists, what we do is leave portals through different times and spaces. So with an art history book in our hand, we can travel the human consciousness.
Nice.
By going into those portals, separating the good and the evil, bad at that moment. And we're able to, in a meditation, able to go into those spaces. This is not physical time travel.
Sure.
This is more
mental. Yeah, I dig it. So I want to kind of circle back to your time in Seattle. You had just had this experience that showed you a lot of things. And so did you have like a, job at that point that did you like quit the next day?
I never went back. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. And you knew that you wanted, you were already in art school. That's right. I
was in art school already. So I had a connection, but it was still kind of scary. But at the same time, I knew in my heart that I really, I couldn't go on or accepting this thing. And I also come from a struggling family background. And and at the same time, I grew up with a satellite dish. So I was able to witness a whole bunch of stuff. Maybe something I've seen. But I got downloaded with all these lifestyle influences, and I was looking at my own family and then looking at that, and I'm like, this is not for me.
Right.
So I was always trying to really not allow to be controlled, because I hated that, as most people do. I'm not, and it's not that easy to relinquish that control of an external perception of you.
Definitely.
But this awakening made me see those shackles, and I instantly this is what I'm against, and I instantly will start right now.
Wow, that's awesome. That's such a bold commitment, And do you think that that's what that experience was asking of you, or you just knew that you just couldn't go back, you couldn't turn back around?
That's what it was asking of me, and I had very dear friends during that time that were witnessing me go through this for years, and I was brought back things to them, and I have to give them a lot of credit, respect, and love, because it really allowed me with their connection and their love for me to feel comfortable enough to lose myself and go out into these experiences. But the synchronicities, I started to understand more from that experience, and I would give myself more into the synchronicities. And a lot of people thought that I was doing a lot of psychedelics, but I wasn't, because if I would do it once, first I would prepare myself for days, and then I would do it in a deep meditation, and then days after I would act it out. Nice. On very, very long walks through downtown Seattle and such.
Okay, so I got to remember these two things. First of all, you talk about long walks, and I just read a quote from Werner Herzog, the documentarian. He did like Grizzly Man and some other like documentaries, but he said he walked, I think, from somewhere in Germany to somewhere in France, and he said that the world reveals itself to those who travel on foot. Did you find that to be true in your experience?
100%. 100%. Not only because you're putting yourself firsthand in communing with nature.
Hmm.
But you're also exercising your left and right hemisphere of your brain and your body
Yeah, as
by
you're
motion.
shifting back
Yeah.
and forth.
All that coupled together with right intent and meditation, you witness the whole reality shift. You start seeing that the reality you were just viewing is not the same.
Right.
It instantly changed in front of your eyes.
Right, right. Just by virtue of moving around directly
Totally.
with your own feet on the earth, or with a small little shoe or something in between. But yeah, I found that profound. And speaking of synchronicities, I just listened to that interview where I sort of like extracted that quote from just yesterday. So here we are, deep in it. So I think everybody's familiar with the term. Oh wait, one more thing before I forget. I'm getting good at these memory games now. Um, uh, so it's early '90s, right? You're in Seattle, and you decide to just go all in on the art. This is long, long before even the internet really took hold as a structure.
We envisioned the
Yeah,
internet.
right,
We
right,
created it.
right, right, and
I'm half joking, half.
right, right. I mean, we could talk about the history of the internet, but maybe we'll say that for another time. What I'm curious about is how how were you able to support yourself um, in that time? What was it like being an artist back then? Because I think most of my listeners, or a lot of them, are my age or younger. I'm 36. In like we'll say 93, I was 8 years old. Um, so what was it like back then to sort of support yourself as an artist?
I have no clue. Uh, I had no clue.
Yeah.
I was not an artist working.
Okay.
Um, I was more of a seeker, 100%. Uh, I would trade for food. I always had a place to live. How that happened, it happened because of love
Yeah.
and supportive friends. And
Nice.
I would always bring gifts. Um, I would always meet people that could provide a lot. And they were attracted because of the magic that was happening. And that's what I was living for. I was searching for God, as I was saying, and not in the sense. And I hate to say it that way because a lot of people use their understanding of that, and it puts an image to it. But you have to be very careful not to do that
Right. It's one
because
of those it's one of those words that, I think the term is jingle, where you say the word and very different definitions pop up in almost everyone's head, like
right.
God
But
especially.
all those things are important because I have this thing called the 8 steps to synchronization. It's my pattern of understanding, and the fourth is belief,
Mhm.
foundation. Um, so all those things are true. All those perceptions, all those realities, however contradictory they may be, they're all beliefs, including science, including being an atheist.
Mhm.
These are all your chosen belief. Um, People oftentimes get hung up in the externalization of these things,
Mhm.
uh, and like the words being an atheist or Christian.
Right.
But in the root of it is a decision. That's all
Mhm.
it is. You're making a decision, and if somebody's contradicting that, just know that they're making a decision too. They're not any better or worse. They're just making, including the science people, even though science would have to take a high seat in so-called reality because they're scientifically approaching reality with tests, and you can't deny those things.
Right.
But as some of us know, there's much more than this, the physics of this reality.
Right. And even looking deep into physics, things start to sort of just
Everything
fall apart or like come together in ways that we didn't expect. And yeah.
which brings us to the future, which is, to me, my conversation, my mission, my art, my interviews, everything is the end result is interdimensional existence.
Okay.
That's the destiny of humankind.
Nice.
Like you were talking, like maybe sometime we can talk about the history of the internet.
Yeah.
But you also have to recognize that the linear and nonlinear dimensions and the perceptions and what's creating what is a nonlinear thing,
Right.
trying to orchestrate us to this moment.
Yeah. Like things can flow backward as well as forward, like causally even.
Yeah, well, that was one of the. I mean, I've had many deep experiences, because you were asking me about the first one, but I've had a lot of first ones.
Yeah.
And this one time that I'm remembering right now, I did come back from the future, and it was really intense. I can tell you that story.
Yeah. What was the future like?
Well, I'll tell you the whole story because it's not really about the future.
Okay.
I consolidated everything pretty quick, but it was the spring equinox.
Yeah.
And I wanted to trip again because I was the tripper of the tribe. And at this point, my friends weren't really into doing it every so often. At this time, backpedal.
Okay.
I told my friends there's going to be a double rainbow, because I was working on prophecies now.
Okay.
Because if everything's nonlinear, there's a way to get in there and profess things.
Sure.
So I told my friends there's going to be a double rainbow on the spring equinox. And it was the day before the spring equinox, and there was a double rainbow outside our window.
Nice.
But talking about the future, we realized that it was actually the equinox that day.
Okay.
So it was like this weird thing. But I think God made my ego not so big that we believe that it was the day before.
Yeah.
And these are real experiences. So then my friend said, I guess we're doing acid. they couldn't believe it. So we had these sugar cubes, and we had 3 of us. And then there was this other 4th friend and says, hey, you want to do some sugar cubes? And he said, sugar cubes, sure. Later, he told me he didn't think that it was acid. So he was in on the ride, not knowing we were doing this until he started really tripping out.
Yeah.
But we're playing this game, Jenga.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're like, everybody's doing their thing. And then halfway through it, we're starting to really get lit. And we started really focusing, and it started getting really high because we're really focused. And then I remember it was the 32nd level. Yeah. And the next one was 33. 33 was always my number of synchronicity. That's what led me to understand more of the language of God, was 33.
Right.
And synchronistic to that was this 33rd piece. And as I was like nervously pushing it in there, all of a sudden I felt that void of friction in any direction. And of course it didn't fall over because I was perfect balance.
Right.
But an explosion happened in my mind. As I exploded, it was like the Big Bang. And I saw the beginning of time. As I was falling back onto the couch in slow motion, I saw the entire history of humankind. And as I was close to falling, it ended up where we were at. And then I kept on falling towards the couch. It kept on going to the future until it crashed on the couch. And I was like, oh my God. What I saw, the future of Earth turning into a 12-pointed star.
Oh, wow.
So that's the future.
Yeah. That's that's got to have some like geometric symbolism in there, right?
100%. And I didn't know anything about this. And sacred geometry the vocabulary didn't really come more established till way later.
Yeah.
And that's precisely it. And then as I was laying there, I look over to my right, and it was this book, The Way of the Seated Earth by Joseph Campbell.
Nice. Yeah.
So I'm like, whoa, that was heavy. And I need to distract myself for a second. I opened up this thing, and it says, the 4 experiences you can have on LSD. And I was like, I opened it up, and it's about agriculture. And this little paragraph is in the book, because later I had to recheck. I had to fact check all my shit.
Yeah.
And it was talking about the Grateful Dead. And then I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Out of nowhere, I just opened it up, started reading this. And the 4th thing was explaining what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
Like, this is crazy. And I close it. And later of that experience, I started seeing how we were creating the universe from that room. We were like the forefathers. There was 4.
Yeah.
And each one of us was the 4 cardinal points through our horoscopes. All these things unraveled days later when I redigested the whole experience.
Yeah.
So that's the beginning of me understanding the future of being a interdimensional thing, because what led up to that point was the boundaries dissolving and all of us becoming one thing. And I saw the internet happen. We were already understanding that this was happening anyway. We're in Seattle with Microsoft and all these companies.
Yeah.
We were already foreseeing this thing. Cell phones just barely came out during that time. My mind took my psychic connection, my third eye awakening, into this grid that was going around the Space Needle as a network. And the more of the future we got, the more the internet became, and the more the grid became. And then the more we started understanding that we're more than this monitor, that we can download any page in our bodies.
Yeah.
And what it was teaching me is that our destiny is interdimensional existence here on Earth, which the only way that I could explain it to people was this thing called the eternal party at the end of time.
Nice. I like putting it in such a simple way that's like easy for any person almost to digest.
People fight it though. It's funny.
Yeah. I mean, I think people fight a lot of things. I mean, even me, I like to be contradictory sometimes.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's duality is good for a conversation.
Absolutely.
That's where a guru makes sense. Guru does work. If it's a really good guru, they're there to have a dialogue with you as yourself.
Yeah.
They externalize the inside into a dualistic perception.
Yeah. I do it all the time in my own mind. I'll have like a little cage match of like, is this true? Is it not? And just like kind of sort of like talk to myself in my mind. Occasionally. I don't go there all that often, I
won't hold you to that. You're not crazy. I think regarding interdimensional existence and duality thinking, to exist on this plane, we have to be dualistic.
Yeah, sure.
Day and night, male, female, even though all those things get dissected more and more because we're going into the singularity, but nevertheless, there's a shadow and a light.
Yeah.
But when I was wanting to become one with God, or for the sake of an easier language, I recognize that you take the duality instead of what I call horizontal duality, which is me and you, even though it might be in your head, to I and I. It's still a duality, but it's only you and God.
Okay.
And that's when you transcend the limits of this physical dimension.
Interesting. I like that. So I wanted to get back to synchromysticism as a word, as kind of like a definition. I think most people know what synchronicity is, so I won't explain that. But when you combine synchronicity and mysticism together, are we talking about guiding your decision making based off of synchronicities that you're looking for? Is that what it is?
That can be partly. I mean, yes, paying attention to synchronicities definitely can help guide your perception because doors open up and you're given a chance to step in.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but the more you start understanding these patterns, you also can consciously create synchronicities. That's what we're doing as artists. We're offering portals, and these portals may be synchronistic viewing for another person, for their understanding of themselves. So the synchromystic name was something that came in as words, because words come in meditation, and I thought that was beautiful. That was actually another experience I had where I time traveled into the pyramid, and I was taught about the word interdimensional and synchromystic, and that was really one of my favorite visions or experiences, rather.
Nice. That's cool. I wanted to ask you, so I scoured through your Instagram a little bit, and since this is a show about art, but also about words, I wanted to ask you about grunge music and living in Seattle at that time. And I guess my question is, what was it about grunge that resonated with you at that time?
Well, when I was first mentioning the Beatles, when I was having a psychedelic awakening, and then the more I got into it, I started recognizing that it's much more than that. And I'm like, I want to connect with what's going on now.
Right.
So then I would go on my paths meditating, and this is where the synchromystic part comes in. People would end up finding me, or I finding them on my path. A lot of those people were some of these members from these bands. I have a story with running into Kurt Cobain in the middle of the night. Have a story of stage diving into a Soundgarden concert that I didn't even know was going on a minute before.
Yeah.
All these were things that happened on my meditating walks of opening up myself, praying really hard for these things to come. And those things did come. And to me, I feel like what I was personally doing, I was opening up the collective third chakra. I mean, third eye.
Okay.
And the grunge movement of that time, to me, represented the fifth chakra. And I was lifting up the vibration, and my symbologies that I was utilizing was the space needle. So I was bringing in this vibration through the space needle as a symbol, and it was my antenna, and that antenna was creating a worldwide grid. So we were bringing this movement of consciousness into a unified field, and with Kurt Cobain and those people at the helm with the message. And some people might not have got the message, but it was definitely there, and it was very powerful. And it's definitely a mile marker in popular music for me.
Yeah.
Because before then it was different.
Yeah.
And after then it was different.
Right.
But it's never. But that was where the difference became.
Yeah.
So I feel like our invocation worked.
Nice. That's crazy. You ran into Kurt Cobain.
That was really crazy because I was having a stomach issue. I was hanging out with my friends at my house. I was having a stomach issue, and I'm like, well, I gotta go for a while.
And I don't want to give anything away, but if you know anything about Kurt Cobain, he had stomach issues as well.
I didn't know until later. That's why I bring it up as one of the main points.
Yeah.
And especially during that time, because it was his darkest heroin days.
Yeah.
This is where I pieced that part together later. Looking back, I'm like, did that really happen? And I'm like, when I left, we're all familiar with him, his silhouette on stage with a stage lights, right, with his pants and everything. I left my house and I saw the street lamp and this guy walking, and it looked exactly like Kurt's silhouette.
Right.
And I was like, that's Kurt Cobain. Oh, whatever. And then I laugh and I go down the stairs and I'm walking, and this person comes up to my face on the other street, and it was him.
Nice.
And I was like, we were talking, and I don't remember too much except this one thing is like, in my painful motions, I was saying, I just want to help heal the world. And he looked at me and says, the world's already healed. And it really hit me very profound. Obviously, we have issues. He had issues, of course.
Of course, yeah.
I had issues, so it was kind of hard to understand. But to this day, I totally understand that that is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't look at him as God or anything for telling me that. But it was this honest reflection of presence. Like he too wanted to do the best, and he did a fucking miraculous job with his message. So yeah, that was one instance of many.
That's so cool. Yeah, grunge had a big impact on my life as well. I think it was because like I'm not exactly old enough to have had an opinion on the music before that, or like the whole kind of like milieu of musical acts going on before that. But like looking back, a lot of it was like late 80s sort of like vapid pop stuff going on and very glitzy, and it was like the height of American what would you call it? Yeah, pop and
Glam and whatever.
Yeah. And then grunge comes along and just like sort of kicks that stuff to the side, and it's just I just you can't deny its realness whether you like the style of it or not. It's like a lot of realness, and it did change after that too. I think this happens in a lot of ways in our world. Like something really special pops up, something really genuine, and then people with interests find it and they reconquer it for their own
commercial
ends, or consumerism, commercialism, all that kind of thing. But yeah,
it's a sacrifice, and that was shown in many, many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Self-sacrifice for the grandest good, though, at the end of it all.
Yeah. I love that too, that the world is already healed. I think that's so cool. Because again, it gets back to the non-linear, how would I say that? Non-linearness. Yeah, that's a really hard word to say. Never trying it again. Of time, right?
That's why I like the interdimensional
aspect of like time and space. That's really cool. Thanks for sharing that story.
Oh man, my favorite stories, like I said, come from there, and other ones are just as special, and some like random ones like Blind Melon.
Oh, nice.
They were my favorite band, but it was a funny experience because I was after Alice in Chains show.
Nice.
Me and my friends were there, and we were always super ripped, and my eyes back then would get blood, like they look like they're bleeding.
Yeah.
Shannon Hoon from the Blind Melon said, "You look like you're stoned." I'm like, "Well, yeah, come over to our apartment." So they all came over to our apartment and says, "We're here in Seattle to record our first album. It's going to be huge." I'm like, "Okay, cool." A couple months later, they're all naked on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine.
Yeah. That's rad. Yeah, I love that. I think this might be a bit hubristic of me to think, but I think that's part of the reason why I started the podcast too, is I feel like artists in Denver and just, you're in California, just kind of the same like tribe vibe artists like us.
100%.
I wanted to document it. You know what I'm saying?
I'm glad you're doing it. It's really important. Like, as you know, I'm trying to do that as well, because it's too much of a special moment to give up. And honestly, us artists, we really need it.
Yeah.
We really need this external dialogue with each other, so other people can recognize themselves.
Right.
It's not like we're trying to put ourselves above other people, but just having an honest conversation, a fun conversation between each other, really stimulates a self-awareness in other people. And that is the mission. That's always been the mission. And it's not, I know that you're a wonderful, awesome artist,
Thank you.
but it's not limited to being an artist.
Right.
We can be art curators, podcasters. The beautiful thing is our movement, for the sake of a better word, because our movement, it's everybody.
Right.
Because everybody can have a visionary experience, or at least they deserve the right to have that. We have plenty of people to talk to and talk about.
Right.
We are super blessed. And if we are persistent with these things, we really might help the collective.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do. We believe we are, but as far as the reality that seems like far gone, if they latch on, there's so much for them. You could start listening, and before you know it, you're gonna die happy.
Yeah.
All the time got swept up by all these great artists. Oh my God.
Just like 20,000 hours or whatever of just conversation. Yeah, that's, to quote Ram Dass again, we're all walking each other home kind of thing. And I don't know if this will heal the world or anything like that, but it can definitely like act as maybe
you are the world
analgesic or just something to take the load off every now and then.
But you are the world.
Yeah, sure.
You are like, you just taking this action is already done it. Now we just have to act it out and walk. But we already saw it. It already happened. So now we just have to open ourselves and allow it to unfold.
Yeah. That can be the tricky part sometimes, though, too.
Very much so, because like I was saying in the beginning, we start attaching ourselves to the externalization.
Right, yeah.
Like the petals unfurling, and then we die with the petal.
Yeah. We identify with the petal instead of
being the
action.
blossom.
Yeah. That's a beautiful way to put it. Let's see. I have a couple more notes here. Oh, yeah, let's actually talk about your work. I know we sort of got into, your whole take on reality, which I think is a pretty healthy take. I really love it. You're like helping me sort of, I'm feeling like more grateful and just like a little bit more at ease talking to you. So thanks for that. But I also wanted to ask you, like, what is it that you're trying to convey, if anything, in your work?
I'm on the quest to the eternal party at the end of time.
Nice.
That's what I'm trying to convey with my art. On the path there is to externalize that message. And I'm a person that doesn't want to define that for you, because that's your gift. That's your gift to define, not for yourself, for us. It's your expression. That's why I created Tribe 13 in the beginning. And I kind of hesitate to say I created, because what I'm talking about predates the gallery and
okay.
But the term Tribe 13, because I would have to give credit to so many people for the actual Tribe 13 movement. That's a wonderful phenomenon that has occurred and keeps occurring. And shout out to Jen Ingram primarily for sustaining that. But the idea to me that I'm trying to convey with my art, in a nutshell, would be Tribe 13. And that is the new culture of Earth, the new humanity. And using the word culture, after listening to Master Terrence McKenna saying culture to your friend, I completely 100% agree with him.
Right.
But at the same time, these are our languages to communicate with each other.
Sure.
So I use it in that sense.
Yeah. And
to create a new platform that exists already. It's not I'm creating this. It's just becoming more aware of this new humanity that is birthing.
mm-hmm.
And that's what I really want to convey with my art.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I think just to get back to culture in general, I've sort of course, huge fan of McKenna, probably listened to him more than, anybody. He's just so fun to listen to.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I love that guy.
Yeah. But anyway, the culture is not your friend thing. Like I was, really, really on board with that. But I also like see the value in culture sometimes too. Like
he's talking the same thing we are.
Yeah.
The externalization, the model, trying to fit into the model, trying to chase the dollar or the car or the girl model. Those forms of the culture are not your friend.
Right.
But culture created by the offering of oneself, if everybody's offering their creativity, and a culture automatically is based on that, because all of it is that, except that we're being ran by visions of an external reality as an illusion to chase after, which is not real.
Right.
It's fake.
Right. Yeah, I think like a ground up culture is really
from oneself, from within.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's see. We've covered a lot. This has been great. I guess I wanted to ask you, what does the term art mean to you in its broadest and or most precise sense?
Well, offering.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing that I always go to, like here in the United States especially, but everywhere we're all striving to be free and we boast freedom. But here specifically in the US, a lot of people convey freedom as the freedom to choose between things. And I think that's far from being a free individual.
Mm-hmm.
To me, freedom means offering. If you're not offering, you're not a free person. If you believe yourself to be free because you have the right, the means to achieve the choices that you want, only means that you're a good consumer at best.
Yeah. I actually wanted to ask you about this quote that I found on your Instagram, but you just broke it down perfectly there. The quote was, "Freedom is not a choice, it is an offering." And I didn't exactly understand that. I thought what you meant was that like life is offering you freedom, but
no, you are offering life.
Freedom. Yeah.
Because if you're not, then you're not free. Because how could you eat all that freedom yourself?
Yeah.
Which goes back to something I wanted to mention earlier about ego. When I was trying to understand what that word meant in the beginning, and because we can't go beyond our ego, and the people that strive to be non-ego people, I consider that very egotistical.
Yeah. It's spiritual materialism, right?
Yeah, but it still exists. So I'm like, how do I deal with it? The term, and I broke it down into two things. One is to feed your ego, which is your classic view of what ego is in most people.
Right.
Like you deserve this, and all those kind of things. Or you express your ego. This is not who I really am, but these are the tools I've gathered to express myself. And I try and do the best I can in my offering. And that's still not you necessarily, your spiritual being.
Right.
You're much more than that. But that is your ego, and you're offering it instead of trying to feed it. And that's the distinction.
That's awesome. Sweet. Yeah, I think freedom is a tricky subject, though. Like, I don't know. There's so many constraints on even like who we are as people, or there's a lot of seeming constraints on that it's hard for me to consider freedom like anything but this sort of like promise of something better, because we're bound by just the constraints of the physical universe most of the time, first of all. And is freedom taking
Until
a
we believe in each
psychedelic?
other, though.
Hmm.
That's the one thing that I have to add, and that's one of the reasons why we should try. Because the
Yeah, yeah,
more we believe in each other, the more we lift those constraints.
yeah. So do you think humanity's moving more towards like a you talked briefly about the singularity. Do you think it's going to be kind of like a hive mind, or a eventual like just one giant organism with individual parts working together in harmony? Is that what you
I don't
see?
think I don't think any one of us can precisely express that, but we can try, and I
Yeah.
think that's our job as artists and stuff. I go back to the term interdimensional existence, which
Okay.
has no limits. But like I touched on earlier, I have my 8 steps to synchronization that always kind of answers what I mean in an eightfold view of that, because you can't really answer that in a one-dimensional way.
Right. Totally. Um, what are those 8 steps? I'd love
The
to hear
eight
them.
seed, the 8 seed words are creation, separation, realization, foundation, emanation, unification, manifestation, synchronization.
Nice.
In the first, when I was first meditating on trying to figure this out, I was awaiting my first child, and I was like, I really can't live my life the way I've been living, so I have to create this pattern so I won't forget these
Okay.
things. So I broke it down into 3 easy steps: creation, separation, realization, and that's enough. But then I realized, oh, that's just personal.
Mhm.
I'm much more than personal. I live in a community and family and so on. So then I have to but my point was to make it as short as possible, as easy as possible, as short as possible, but all inclusive, uh, which would help me with my meditation, psychedelic or otherwise, because sometimes we are flooded with imagery and knowledge and these kind of things when we're having a peak moment. And this science, for the sake of a better word, allows me to consolidate as much as I can while the flood is happening. I can
Ah,
put this information here, that information here, plug it in, perfect.
nice.
Um, and the 8 steps, I'll briefly describe what they mean.
Yeah.
Creation, you are born. You're born from a point.
Mhm.
2, separation. Um, you become yourself from your mother, father, day and night, me and you. They
Mhm.
start making distinctions based on your duality. Third is realization. You recognize yourself to be the same as everybody else, however different you are. That is the awakening.
Mhm.
That you're much more than the separated view you were taught. Now that you've moved away from your home, that you've become your own person.
Mhm.
Or is foundation. You create your belief based off your awakening. And that belief could be a handed down belief like Christianity
Mhm.
or atheism, or I'll create my own reality. Whatever it is that you are deciding to allow as your reality, you're making that choice. Um, 5 is emanation. You emanate, you express your belief, who you are. This is where the art movement comes in. Being an artist, being an expressionist,
Yeah.
and by going outward and expressing yourself leads you to number 6, which is unification. You start attracting like-minded people, or the opposite in a moment. Nonetheless, it's a communion, and you start networking, and that's where social platforms and all that fall in. And 7 is manifestation. Babies are born from people we come across. Projects are born. Things manifest. Um, and 8 is the synchronization of manifested forms. When we get in the rhythm of manifesting and working with each other, synchronicity starts happening. The universe starts recognizing you and what you're wanting to do. The reason why it's not that the reason why it happens to us is in a moment we are randomly in a synchronous moment. or we are open-minded enough to make it happen. But collectively, we're not there yet because so many people are contradicting each other, not really dissolving the boundaries that need to be dissolved, so we can really work together. And the more we learn how to work together, the more the synchronicity of the universe starts providing for us. Even though it is doing that as we speak, it's just doing it in a very diseased way.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of distraction going on.
Distraction, yeah. It's a good word.
Yeah. So I have a couple more questions for you. One more is about scrolling through your Instagram again. I'm curious, are you sober now? I saw a post kind of describing sobriety, and
yeah, last year I took a break last year from caffeine for 5 months.
Nice.
And at the same time, I gave up herb, which was amazing because that's been for many years.
Oh yeah.
And then I haven't done psychedelics either, and it's about a year now.
Yeah.
And the smoking herb's been a blessing to take a break from.
Mm-hmm.
But the psychedelics definitely are in the back of my mind always. But my systems of understanding allow me to be psychedelic.
Sure.
Like I said, that's why I created the 8 steps of synchronization, because I can meditate on those 8 different categories and have a psychedelic moment. And the other thing is, I don't really agree with chasing a psychedelic or any other kind of high. I think that's a misuse of all that.
Mm-hmm.
I really do believe in the reality that we are tapping into. And that does not exclude anybody if you're high or not. So just because we don't partake doesn't mean that we can't do the work to bring those visions forth or that language forth. But we have to be really careful not to sound like you're opposing psychedelics or opposing anything for that matter, because that's the lesson of the psychedelic is the disillusion of boundaries.
Yeah.
And that includes doing the thing itself, because we're tapping into a reality. Many people might not believe that, but I believe that. And if that is true, then it's my birthright to be psychedelic.
Absolutely.
Without doing anything, just by being. I'm a human being. I'm an artist. I'm psychedelic.
Right. You're mind made. Right. That's what psychedelic
I guess
exactly technically means. It's like
free.
Yeah. Nice. Well, that's cool. Yeah. I've taken a break from herb once or twice in the past, I don't know, decade or so. And I always feel like on fire when I do it, mostly in a positive way. But sometimes how would I say it? The frustrations are a little harder to deal with when they come along.
Totally.
Although I tend to be like a little bit more clear. My memory's definitely way better. And I just, maybe it's time to take another break, you know?
Whatever you feel, but feel it and go
Exactly.
on with it and be yourself. But the thing is, my love for cannabis is so deep. She has definitely taught us, and we probably wouldn't be having this conversation.
Oh, definitely
without her.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, she helped catapult the visionary art movement. I could easily say that.
Certainly.
Especially from Tribe 13 and those kind of things. I was taught on how to distribute vibes the way she likes to be distributed.
Mm-hmm.
And that means openness, kindness, offering. And I could talk way more on that subject. But she definitely is there to show us and teach us that we're really needing to heal, congregate, and listen to the earth. But that's only part of the story, and she knows that too. The rest is you're just a baby on her breast,
mm-hmm.
and you're gifted with this experience to blossom into, but not forgetting that you're a blossom and you're an offering from her womb.
Nice. Well, yeah, I think that's a beautiful place to wrap it up. Thanks again so much, Roman, for joining me today. And
my pleasure.
Tell people where they can find you. Just throw out an Instagram or a website or something like that.
My Instagram is synchromystic, and my my website, which is in the works still, is synchromystic.art. Yeah, primarily that. And as if you follow me on Instagram, you notice that I can't keep myself away. But I'm very thankful that I have a place where I can express my 2 cents.
Yeah.
And also the portal that opens up to a phenomenal amount of really good art.
Yeah, right.
And when I was starting, it was really hard to have this conversation, including the art. They would always associate to 60s art, psychedelic art, which is great. That's where we are coming from. But now we are well established. We are here.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you again. And thanks everybody for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. Peace. Thank you again for listening to another episode of Artsy AF Podcast. If you are interested in supporting the Patreon, that address is patreon.com/RTAF podcast. And I want to thank all my patrons. You guys keep this engine running. I couldn't do it without you. Go over there and check out the tiers I have available. It includes video, guest suggestions, patron-only posts, and some merchandise. Thank you again for listening. Please rate, review, subscribe. Do all those little things that help get Artsy AF into the consciousness of more and more people. Yeah.